Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're just going to give it a few seconds here to let folks get settled in before we kick things off. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're just going to wait right until 1 o'clock before we kick things off here. All right, looks like we're at pretty good size here. So I'm going to jump in with some opening remarks, and then I'll pass it over to Victor. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ARMA's EPR webinar series. Today's session is the second Oversight Fee Consultation webinar. My name is Kayla Duty, and I'm a Communications Manager with Canadian Strategy Group. It is my pleasure to serve as facilitator and moderator for today's webinar. And I would like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. ARMA works with Albertans from all areas of our province and acknowledges the Indigenous peoples who lived among and traveled through the land in the area currently known as Alberta. The relationship that peoples of Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, Alberta's Métis and Inuit people have with the land is founded on a deep respect for the environment. This connection forms the foundation of our responsibility and vision of inspiring a future without waste. This webinar today will present information live and answer any questions that may help inform producer feedback throughout the consultation process. To keep the time moving along nicely, we will follow prior webinar settings where our registrant audio functionality has been turned off. So to ask a question, we invite you to use the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen, where questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. A reminder as well that these webinars are being recorded and they will be made available on the ARMA website afterwards. With that said, I will now turn it over to the Director of EPR Operations and Change Optimization, Victor Dong. Over to you, Victor.
Thank you so much, Kayla, and hello everyone, and welcome to our second and final fee consultation webinar for EPR oversight fees in Alberta for this year. As Kayla mentioned, my name is Victor Dong. I am the Director of EPR Operations here at ARMA. I will be taking you through the material we have for you on what to expect for the 2024 and 2025 oversight fees. So before I begin, I do want to mention that this webinar has the same information as our first fee consultation webinar back on October 1st. If you attended the first webinar or have watched the recording, which is available on our website, there is no new information or major changes. Of course, you are welcome to stay for this webinar, especially if you have questions to ask us after live. But I do want to mention this before getting started in case you want some time back in your day. So with that, let's start by talking about the fee setting timeline. So our consultation began on September 30th, and it will run until November 14th. During this time, you as a producer will have the opportunity to review our draft oversight fee rates and provide feedback. The input we receive from you as producers will help shape the final fee structure, ensuring that it's fair and sustainable as possible. Once the consultation closes, we will be compiling all the feedback and summarize the results. A detailed report is going to be submitted to the Ministry of Environment and Protected Areas by November 20th. And this ensures the government is fully informed of stakeholder feedback as part of our decision-making process. Following the report submission, our Board of Directors will review and approve the 2024 and 2025 oversight fee rates, and we anticipate this will take place in early December. Once our rates are approved by the board, they will be published on our website shortly thereafter, so sometime in early to mid-December. And this hopefully will give you as producers enough time to review the final rates before invoicing starts in January of 2025. In terms of our approach to fee setting, really this is all based on the principles we have outlined in our fee setting policy. This policy was consulted on and finalized back in February and is publicly available on our website today. To summarize, there are three key objectives we focused on while building our fee setting process. The first is that we want this to be a transparent process. We are authorized by the government to establish and collect fees to recover costs related to EPR, especially our oversight mandates. We want to ensure that the fee setting methodology and our proposed fees are well understood and that we have proper feedback before finalizing our fees. Transparency to us in this process is key to gaining your trust as a stakeholder and to ensure we are aligned with regulatory expectations. The second principle is that the fees we set needs to meet the needs of our oversight obligations. We need to ensure that we are financially sustainable as we oversee the EPR system. So this includes setting up a reserve fund that allows us to respond to ongoing needs and any emerging risks. We want to make sure the fee we set is about ensuring we have the resources necessary, but to manage the program effectively for now and for future. And third, we want to ensure that our fees are reasonable. And we want to make sure they're based on the actual cost of oversight, and they're also fairly allocated to the two programs within EPR, PPP and HSP, or single-use products, packaging and paper for short for PPP, and hazardous and special products. And of course, continuous improvement is always top of mind for us as we launch the program. So that's why we want to make adjustments and refinements as necessary to ensure that we have that fairness and transparency. And as we set fees, we will consider the impact on stakeholders. We want to make sure we minimize any marketplace distortions and that the fees are understandable for all obligated parties. In terms of our fee setting framework, it consists of three key parts. The first step really involves us understanding the total cost of oversight, which translates to the cost we need to recover for overseeing the system. This for the next year includes both startup costs, so that is our system build over the last 2 years as we stand up the program since the regulation has come into effect, and ongoing operational costs that will start next year. And these would be annual costs that we require to maintain and administer oversight function for the system. Once we have a clear budget, that budget and the cost to be recovered is then allocated to the two different programs, so PPP and HSP. This ensures that proportional cost of oversight is assigned to each program and that it actually reflects the activities we perform for each program. And finally, the cost is set for each producers within their respective program. So we have established a methodology to determine how oversight costs are distributed among individual producers as well. In terms of the numbers you'll see today, we have categorized them into 4 main buckets as far as what our cost recovery objectives are. The first one is our startup costs. And this refers to all of the initial investments we have made to establish oversight of EPR in Alberta. This category includes our expenses, such as development of bylaws and policies over the last year, all of our engagement efforts to make sure stakeholders are heard and we are informed in our decisions, and any capital investments, specifically our software registry system, necessary to support the infrastructure for EPR oversight. And our startup cost includes all of our costs at the inception when we received oversight authority, so around early 2023, all the way until March of next year. That is considered our stand-up period. Our annual costs, so these are the costs that will incur for day-to-day operation of EPR oversight. This includes administrative, operational, and capital expenses required for the functioning of the program. And annual costs are expected to start in April of next year as we transition to operations. We have factored in the creation of a reserve fund. So this amount proposed is fairly minimal. It's really designed to cover wind down activities if necessary, as well as mitigate some risks and provide a safety net for unforeseen costs that may arise during the program's operation. Finally, we've split out the financing cost. So as we are standing up oversight independently, there was a cost to borrow for us to stand up EPR oversight in Alberta. So the financing costs are split out just for transparency. The majority of financing costs you'll see is related to our startup period, as there has been no recovery of costs. And there may be a small operational financing cost throughout the year. One final note, our fiscal year does run from April to March of every year. So our operating and capital costs for 2025 currently are estimates. and they are still subject to our board approval. So in December, our board is approving our operating budget for next year, which in turn, of course, will finalize our fee rates for both 2024 and 2025. To start, we will just take a quick look at the breakdown of our startup costs. So this covers all of our activities from 2023, 2024, and the first 3 months of 2025. That is considered our startup period. Our current projection is about 13.2 million total over the 2 years and a bit. 28% of that is salaries and benefits for the staff that we build up for standing up EPR. 28% is our IT and registry system, and this is the capital component of our startup cost, so the building of the ARMA Connect system that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We had legal and consulting costs, which represents 16%. So this is working with subject matter experts across the nation, our legal counsel to make sure we are interpreting regulatory requirements correctly and setting up a lot of our policies, bylaws, and procedures. Of course, we have overhead expense that represents about 14%, administrative costs, rent, corporate costs that we share with the other half of ARMA. And the 14% is that cost of borrowing for standing up the EPR system. We are looking to recover the startup cost over a 5-year period, so from 2024 to 2028. And this aligns with our software amortization standards here at ARMA. In terms of what the cost looks like specifically for 2024 and 2025, so this looks at both our startup and our annual cost that is going to start next year. So we are recovering the 2024 oversight fees in 2025. Part of the decision was because we didn't really have a good idea of our stand-up costs until halfway through 2024. We didn't want to invoice for 2024 after most producers have set their budget for the year. So part of the feedback we got early on is that 2024 oversight fee recovery should be delayed until 2025, which is why for our fee consultation, this is a consultation for both 2024 oversight fees as well as 2025, with the 2024 oversight fees to be invoiced in January of next year, and the 2025 oversight fees to be invoiced in April of next year as well. So this table represents the split up of the costs into the 4 buckets I had mentioned in the previous slide. We have provided some information all the way to 2028. And this is just to show you how the startup cost is being amortized over the 5 years. Of course, we really only have our estimated annual operating budget for next year. And as we progress every year, we will have operating costs ongoing. So now that we have our oversight fee and what we're looking to recover, let's talk a bit about how the costs are going to be allocated. So to start, we are, of course, using the supply data provided to us by producers in calculating the oversight fee for individual producer and for the program. As we are still waiting for some supply reports, the fee rates we have released, these are based on the currently available supply data. So this represents 93% of all producers in PPP who we are expecting to report, and 86% of producers in HSP who are expected to report. These numbers have increased a bit since the first presentation, as these numbers were of end of September. So there has been a slight increase in both programs for number of producers that have reported. But we wanted to have the numbers reflect the actual data at the time of us releasing our fee rates. Any additional reporting would mean that the potential decrease in the fee rates as more supply data is added to the overall pool. So we are still actively engaging with producers who have not yet submitted their supply report to get as much supply information as possible before we finalize our fees. And then this is currently, so the numbers you see is based on what was reported back in September for the fee calculation. And really for us, one of the big challenges in Alberta is that when it comes to fee setting and trying to balance startup costs with the number of producers in the system, is that we do have less producers compared to other jurisdictions, just due to the size of Alberta. So we do have some unavoidable costs that are similar to any province that have stood up EPR oversight. So building the registry system, any of our critical infrastructure investments, regardless of the population size, we will need to make that investment. All of our operating requirements, such as developing our bylaws, policies, and procedures, all of these are, of course, necessary to set up and run this system. And all of these costs generally needs to be incurred regardless of the size and the number of producers we have. So the challenge for us here in Alberta is the ability to recover these costs over a smaller number of producers, which in turn translates to the lower supply volume compared to other jurisdictions. So for example, in this graph we show, Ontario, for example, they do have significantly higher volumes with about just over 1 billion kilos of total supply data to ours, which we currently are about 269 million across the two programs. And unfortunately, fewer producer and lower volume means the costs are spread across fewer entities. So you may result in a higher per producer oversight fee. So in short, while we face the same fixed costs as some of the larger jurisdictions, we do have fewer producers to spread these costs across, which naturally does drive up our oversight fee for each producer. So that is why we're trying to, as much as possible, to strike the right balance with this in mind of the allocation to each program and individual producers. In terms of actual dollars, here is what the allocation to PPP and HSP look like for the next 2 years. So for 2024, the allocation for PPP for oversight fees is 3.9 million, making up, of course, the largest portion of that 4.6 million total recovery objective. And the HSP allocation is about 700,000 for that same year. For 2025, the PPP allocation increases to 7.7 million, while HSP allocation rises to 1.4. And these allocations are based on the proportional cost attributed to each of the two programs. What that looks like for an individual producer is that in any producer, there will be a flat fee for each program and a potential variable fee for each program. So all producers across both programs will have a flat fee, and certain producers will have a variable fee in addition to the flat fee. Currently, our proposed rate means that 40% of producers in either program will pay the flat fee only, while 60% of producers will pay a flat fee and a variable fee. And the threshold for who pays a variable fee is based on the percent of proportional to the number of producers. So we've estimated that threshold to be at 40% split, 40-60. For PPP, that translates to if your supply data was over 50,000 kilograms, then you would have a flat fee as well as a variable fee. For HSP, that threshold is 2,000 kilograms. And this is one of the key consultation pieces we are looking for your feedback on. And I will talk about that later on when we get into the specifics of our fee survey. But for any producer who is looking to estimate what their oversight fee costs are for Alberta for next year, this is the formula you can use to determine what your oversight fee is. And we have added an example in this presentation to help you calculate that as well. In terms of the actual fee rates for PPP, the flat rate for 2024 is currently proposed at $80. And the flat rate for 2025 is proposed at $150 with the variable rate below. And we have the HSP flat rate at $60 for 2024 and $110 for 2025 with the variable rate there on the screen as well. So that variable rate will only be applied to producers who is above the threshold, which is currently set at 50,000 for PPP and 2,000 for HSP. In terms of oversight fee and the process, I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about what the fee setting cycle looks like and what you can expect. So this is the first year we are doing fee setting and fee consultation, but for every subsequent year, this will be the standard process. So there is a structured annual cycle, and this really began with supply reports that producers are required to submit by June 30th of each year. And of course, supply report is crucial for us to calculate the fees for each subsequent year. In the fall of every year, we plan on doing our fee consultation. It will always be a 45-day consultation process. We aim to start in early September to give us enough time to get as much supply data in to help us inform fees, but hopefully early enough in the year that you will help with your budgeting process as well. We don't anticipate big variation in the fee rates we release in our consultation in the fall to when rates are finalized in December. So our goal is to give you an as accurate number as possible for budgeting in the fall rather than waiting for our final rates, which are set in December. We anticipate small adjustments, and as we have the program run longer and longer, the hope is to certainly have a very accurate fee rate so that you have some certainty in budgeting. Invoicing will always happen in April of the subsequent year for that year's oversight fee. Next year is the only exception because we are standing up the program last year and this year, and we are recovering the cost for 2024. That is why there is one billing cycle in January and a second billing cycle in April. But April is our standard invoice time period. We hope that this cycle does ensure a transparent and predictable process for U.S. producers and for us to set and collect oversight fees. So for this year, many of you submitted supply reports as an example on June 30th. So that data is used to calculate our oversight fee for 2025. We also use that data for 2024 with the stand-up period. And now we're in that consultation process where you are able to see our draft rates and hopefully use this number to help you budget. We will be posting our final rates in December as our board approves them. And invoice will happen in January and April, with January being that special circumstances. In terms of our payment terms, options, and interest policy, we follow a standard 60-day payment period once invoices are issued. And of course, timely payments are essential to ensure compliance with our financial process and operations for us of the program. ARMA's corporate policy is a 15% annual interest rate on overdue accounts, and that is standard across the corporation. And we have a variety of payment options to make sure that you can meet your obligations. Before we get into what the survey looks like, producers will have the option to delegate payments of oversight fees to a pro that you have delegated certain responsibilities to. So the delegation is in place, and many of you may have already used the pro to submit your supply report. So you would have seen that payment of oversight fees is an option to say yes or no. But after chatting with most of the pros, this feature will not be available until 2026. So for 2025, so for both billing cycles next year, producers will be invoiced directly, and you will need to pay directly to ARMA for your cost of oversight. And this is largely driven by feedback that we had from our registered and active pros, with the majority of pros letting us know they do not plan on starting to offer payment on behalf of producers until 2026. So the earliest we would be turning on this feature in our system is the 2026 billing, which will happen in April of 2026. We will continue to provide you with updates once that feature is available. Many of you are on our bulletin, and that is the best way to get information from us. So once you can have that payment goes through your pro, we will certainly let you know. So that covers the majority of the content we wanted to talk to you about for fees. I just want to take some time to actually go through the survey. that you should have received from from the bulletins at the start of the consultation. If you have not received the survey or you're not sure where it is within your organization, we have provided easy access links at the end of this presentation as well. So the survey consists of two components. The first component really is the primary feedback we're hoping to get from you as producers, and it's really around the structure of the oversight fees. Now, the screen is a bit busy, so I'll just take some time to kind of walk you through what we're asking you for feedback on. And it's really we're looking for your feedback on what the proposed variable fee threshold should be and what amount the flat rate should be for each program. So if we look at the PPP table, which is the top table, we have three options provided to you on what the proposed flat fee looks like. So there's option 1, 2, and 3, and we show you what each option's flat fee would be. So the proposed fee from us is that the flat fee is $80 for 2024 and $150 for 2025. That represents option number 1. And really how we derive those flat fee is it accounts for 1% of the total cost recovery target from PPP for that year. So if we collect $80 from every single PPP producer who's obligated to pay oversight fee, that will equate to 1% of the total cost recovery target. So the first part of what we're looking for feedback on is what percentage of the cost recovery should come from flat fees only. And the three options you have there is 1%, 2%, or 5%. And we've provided the corresponding flat fee amount for reference. The second part of the feedback for this question is what percentage of producers should pay a variable fee. So the current proposed threshold is that 60% of producers pay both a flat fee and variable fee, and that translates to a volume threshold of 50,000 kilograms for PPP. If you think it should be 35-65 split, then that would lower the threshold to 35,000. And if you think it should be a 45-55 split, that increases the threshold to 60,000, meaning any producer who supply less than 60,000 kilograms would only pay the flat fee, and anyone over 60,000 would pay the flat fee and variable fee. So when you combine these two feedback options together, there are 9 unique options available for feedback that you can choose as an individual producer. So if you like option A, then you would be in the option A column, and you have also the option of picking the amount that should come from a flat rate. So in the survey, you'll have the option of 1A, 1B, 1C, all the way to 3C. These are the 9 options available to you. And we're looking for feedback on where is the balance between the fixed and variable threshold split, as well as the amount that producers should contribute for flat fee. And really that speaks to, for the smaller producers, what is a fair amount for them to contribute to the system. So this is the primary feedback that we're looking for in terms of where we should set the threshold and the flat rate. Hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions on all of these options, do feel free to reach out to us directly. The second part of the survey is a more general feedback form. So we have 4 buckets for your written feedback. That is the startup cost recovery, the way we've allocated costs to HSP and PPP, the way we are calculating individual producer fees, or just any general comments you have. So these are in the survey are just written buckets of feedback that you can provide any text feedback you have for us. And both of these will be what's compiled in terms of fee consultation feedback that we provide to the GOA and will help us inform our final fee decisions. So if you haven't received the survey, you can email us, or these are the QR code that correspond to each survey link. We do ask for your producer registration number. That number can be found on your ARMA Connect account. On our website, we do have a quick guide for how to find your producer number if you're not sure where it is. And the main reason we ask for this in our survey is because we want to make sure the predominant feedback we get is from producers, because you are the ones paying the cost oversight. We want to make sure your input is considered first. Of course, any association, any representative of producers, we do also ask feedback from them. But if you're an individual producer who wants to give us your direct feedback, having that producer number really will make sure that we know your feedback is directly from a producer. We have added a few frequently asked questions since our first webinar, and we've just added them here in case they are helpful. So one of the ones we got is, what is ARMA's oversight fee for? So this is just for us to provide oversight to the EPR system. The cost of recycling, that will be through the operator of the common collection system for each program in PPP and HSP. And that is where you will be getting your recycling cost from. For variable rates, does it apply to only supply above the threshold? And the answer is that it applies to all material volume. So if you are over the threshold, it will be the variable rate multiplied by the total volume you've supplied to us in the supplier reports. We have provided just a few quick examples for if a producer reports a certain amount, how you can calculate what you can expect your fee to be. The only thing I'll mention here is that the current threshold, the proposed threshold, is 50,000. So if your supply volume is between that 35,000 to 60,000 range, whether you pay a flat fee or variable, flat and variable rate, that could change depending on both producer feedback and ultimately how we set the fees. So these are just examples to help you show what your calculation could look like. We've provided one for under threshold and one for over threshold. So that is there for your reference as well. And I believe, yeah, that is the end of our presentation. I think there's some questions coming in. So Kayla, I will pass it back to you to help me moderate. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Victor. That was great. As Victor just said, we do have a few questions in the Q&A, so we're going to be walking through those now. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to plug those in there, and we'll make our way to it as we go through them. So the first question I have for you here, Victor, is does the 2025 total cost include the 2024 startup costs?
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. So the 2025 total cost, and I will go under the assumption that you mean for both 2024 and 2025 oversight fee, it will include some startup costs. So we are looking to recover the cost of startup, so that estimated 13.2 million over 5 years. So your total invoiced amount for the 2025 year would include both the 2024 oversight fee and the 2025 oversight fee. So it would end up include 2 years of the 5 total for startup costs that we are recovering.
Great, thanks for that one. This next one here says, I am new to EPR. So help me understand why there are fewer producers in Ontario versus Alberta. My company is a producer residing in Ontario. Are we supposed to register?
Yeah, so the Alberta's EPR regulation, the way we define producer, it is resident in Canada. So if you are within Canada, you are supposed to register for Alberta as well, assuming you sell into Alberta. And yet the number of producer, we're saying there's generally fewer number of producer because there is less people. If you look at the supply volume that Ontario has to what we have currently reported, it's very aligned to the proportional representation of population. So Alberta is about 30% of Ontario's population, and our supply volume is actually quite closely aligned. I think last time I looked, it was about 29%. And I haven't quite looked at the number of producers in Ontario. It's been a bit, but I think Ontario is up to about 1,800 producers for their Blue Box program, and we're sitting just under 800 producers. So we are kind of following that trend.
Great, thanks for that one. This next one here asks, when you say exceed the threshold, does this mean exceeding the weight that were originally set out, such as the 9 tons of paper for over 1.5 million in revenue?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a great clarifying question. So any producer who have revenue under 1.5 million, at the time of registration into our system, you would have been exempt at the time of registration on revenue. And for those producers who is under that revenue threshold, you wouldn't have any reporting obligations. So supply report wouldn't have been generated for you. Now, if you are over that 1.5 million in revenue, all producer over 1.5 million in revenue would have supply report obligations. So reporting would have been generated for you. Now, if you are over the material threshold, which is referenced here, and that will be 9 tons for paper, 2 tons for both flexible and rigid plastic, and 1 ton for metal and glass. So if you're under all of those material thresholds, we wouldn't have included you in the calculation for as part of the oversight fees. So anyone who is both revenue and material exempt, you won't receive an invoice for oversight. So all of our calculations for our rates, for our supply report volume, all of that excludes all of the producer who are under either the revenue or material exemption. And we're only using the supply volume that's left of the producers who are over both threshold and will be obligated to pay.
Great, thanks for that, Victor. Next one here asks, why is HSP much higher compared to other provinces?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately that's a bit of a complicated answer. What we find is our HSP is much different than many other provinces. I think if you're looking at our per rate cost, it certainly is very different. But the big thing for us is the material that's within HSP. We have a hard time trying to see how comparable we are because they're very different. I'll just use Ontario as an example because that's the closest to our regulation. But for example, paint and used oil is part of HSP in Ontario. And same with things like propane tanks. So, just by nature, their volume would be quite a bit higher. So for example, in HSP, and I'm just going to jump around in my slide slightly. So if you look at HSP in Ontario, they have about 139 million kilos. And a lot of that is the extra materials that would be considered in their HSP program. For us, our 9 million kilos is only the single-use and rechargeable batteries and any flammable, toxic pesticide products and corrosive products that isn't part of paint, for example, or used oil. So we do have a much smaller HSP program in Alberta, and it makes it a bit harder for us. But that is kind of why that rate looks such a jarring difference.
Great, thanks for that one. This next question here is about the dates and years. It says, we have recently submitted 2023 Alberta report, so 2022 supply data, for the 2024 invoice. So to confirm, this means that we will anticipate an invoice in 2025.
I'll say maybe, and only maybe because one of the previous questions talked about that material threshold. So because even though you may be material exempt, you do still need to report supply. So if you're under that 92211 threshold for paper, plastic, and metal and glass, then you wouldn't get an invoice. So it really depends on what your supply volume is. But definitely take a look at our material exemption thresholds for each material category. And then, of course, there is only an exemption for PPP. So if you're an HSP producer, there is no exemption. So yes, then you would have an invoice if you've reported. But if you're in a PPP producer, then check the threshold first. You need to be under all thresholds to be exempt from paying. If you're over in any one material category, then you will be invoiced for all material categories.
Great, thanks for that one. This next one here says, is the recycling fee in addition to the ARMA flat and variable fees? And where do we find the recycling fee?
Yes, so the recycling fee would be with the operator of the common collection system, which really translates to the active and approved pros in Alberta. So Circular Material is currently the operator for PPP, and both Call to Recycle and Product Care are the operators for HSP, and those two pros operate the different programs within HSP. So that is where the recycling fee would come from. As a producer, right, so you would register with us for your obligations, but you should also be working with the operators for your recycling fee part.
Great, thanks for that one. And this next one's kind of along the same idea, the same theme. Will these oversight fees be in addition to the circular materials fee schedule, or will it be in a separate invoice?
So this will be in addition to the circular material fee. Eventually, if you are looking to have your pro pay your oversight fee costs, it can be, I'll say, one invoice, with the caveat that one of our requirements from all pro who are looking to pay is that there's a clear distinction of which portion is your oversight fee cost versus the recycling fee cost. So it is possible that you will get one invoice from a pro if you are asking them to pay. But one of our requirements is that there's that distinction, so you know exactly how much your oversight fee cost is versus other fees.
Great, thanks for that one, Victor. And it looks like that's all the questions we have in the Q&A now. So I'm just going to give it another minute or so to see if anyone else has anything they would like to add before we sign off for today. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes here. Thanks so much to everyone for already getting those questions in. This has been a really great conversation, and thanks to Victor for answering them so thoroughly. We have another, thanks so much everyone for getting the questions in. That's perfect. So I'll ask this one here. So all invoices will come from ARMA and not Circular Materials, CM.
So oversight fee invoice will come from ARMA. Recycling fee for operating will be separate. So that could be from your, sounds like this question, PPP, but it would be from Circular Materials. Okay, but eventually you could have both come from Circular Materials. ARMA would never invoice on behalf of Circular Materials.
Okay, great. Thanks for that one. And this other one here says, how can we connect or register with a pro? Any rough estimate for pro fees?
Yeah, great question. So we do have all active and registered pros listed on our website. So those are the pros that we have approved to operate in the system. When you register with ARMA, we do give you the ability to connect with the pro by requesting, for example, having them be your delegation. So they would get notified if you have selected them in the system, then we anticipate you will hear from them. We can't really estimate on the pro fees as that's something they do. And I do know that certain pro is going through that process. I just don't have visibility into what that cost is. And but if you need to look for a connection and you're not sure, they are listed with their contact information on our website as well. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that, Victor. And that is a really good reminder. The ARMA website is a great resource of information. So a lot of the answers to those questions are found there and more information as well. I just see one more question here. So just a reminder for anyone else that has any questions to get them in before we conclude today. This question here asks, are there any government funding available?
There is no government funding, as EPR is a producer responsibility system. So that is also why we had to stand up EPR separate to incur the costs ourselves, and all fees are recovered through producers.
Great, thanks. And that looked like the last one that we have here in the Q&A. So just going to give it another minute here for any folks to get any last questions in before we conclude. There's been lots of great questions so far, so just give it a minute here to see if anything else comes in. There's a question here just inquiring about where they can get the threshold data, like where that information would be available.
Yeah, so our presentation will be available on our website. So the presentation is separate as well as the webinar. So we have our proposed threshold in the fee consultation survey. One of the questions will ask you about what you think the threshold are. So you can see the 3 possible outcomes, which is the for each program. So there's a couple spots you can find it, but our proposed one right now is 50,000 for PPP and 2,000 for HSP.
Great. All right. Okay, so I think that is probably the end of the questions here. I don't see any other ones coming in, so I'll get ready and we'll wrap this up. I just want to say thank you again to Victor for that presentation. It was fantastic. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. It was a really great conversation. We really appreciate all the questions that were put into the Q&A. And it really helps create a really engaging and robust dialogue. So we thank you for that. As kind of noted at the top of things here, this recording from this session will be available later this week, actually, on the ARMA website for anyone who wants to revisit the conversation or check out the slides in case you missed anything here today. And likewise, for any additional EPR information, you can visit the ARMA website or connect directly with the ARMA team as well. They are ready to answer any questions that you have and eager to support. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.